Sorry about that, y'all. I have another, astrology video for y'all today. And it is Jupiter in the fifth house. So Jupiter is this planet of expansion, growth, luck, you know, seeing opportunities and seizing them, regardless of whatever. You have the confidence to basically live life to the fullest, learn from your experiences that you have. You like to seek, exciting things. You will not let anything slow you down from doing that. You know what you want to do and you attack it, essentially. No talking, no overthinking things, just that. Now, the fifth house has to do with joy, entertainment, creativity, and recognition. So you're being recognized for being a confident person who, tries to experience everything life has to offer, even if you're, not the, smartest guy in the world or woman in the world. Because guess what? At least you're putting yourself forward. At least you're trying to grow. At least you're trying to, experience abundance, having more. You can't just stay comfortable. If you want to try something new, you got to try something new. You don't second guess yourself. You just act on it. So, when it comes to this, we have all 12 signs. I'm going to do it and tell you, how it is for each of you. So, Aries, Jupiter in the fifth house. Aries, Jupiter in the fifth house. You are aggressive about going towards, the things you want to experience in this life. New job, new activity you want to, get into, whatever, And even if it's something that, because like going into it, you're like, I think it's going to be fun, right? And it ends up being a challenge. You don't care. You still like it anyways, because guess what? At least you're doing what you wanted to do, and you didn't allow other people to hold you back from doing that. They're naysaying and all this other shit. Now people respect you because you do shit like that. You don't let other people slow you down. You just fucking do it. You do what you set out to do. You meet those challenges head on. People love that. They're attracted to you because of that. You inspire them to, do similarly. Maybe, your friend or somebody else is, too, caught up in other people's shit, right? They need to, do for themselves, be a little more selfish. I say with the Aries energy, it's like this, there's a good selfishness and then there's a bad selfishness, unhealthy, right? With Jupiter in Aries, seizing opportunities when they arise, you want to do something, you're right to it, you don't let anything slow you down. You'll meet the challenges head on. Whatever comes your way. People are like, but what if this happens? What if this happens? You're like, no, I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna meet that challenge head on, and I'm still gonna get what I need from it. I'll learn something from it. It's like that. You see the positive in it, or others people just see the negative things, and then they just sit to the side and do whatever. Now that brings me to the next sign, which is Taurus, Jupiter in the fifth house. But also I gotta say this too. You probably have kids too, and when you do have kids, they might be more masculine too. So they will probably be male children too, if you have that placement. In the fifth house. So if you're a guy and you're doing things and you run around doing whatever you're doing, and you're banging hoes too, and you have Jupiter and Aries in the fifth house specifically, you'll probably have boys. Now, the next person is Taurus, Jupiter in the fifth house. Taurus, Jupiter in the fifth house. You don't do things that way. You're not much of a risk taker. However, you are willing to take risk. See, it's not that you're not a risk taker. You're willing to take risk on things pertaining to money and your security. So where other people won't go for let's say you're given a deal, right? You're given a deal, you can take this money right now for, $50,000. But if complete this task and do it right, we'll give you $5 million. You're riskier when it comes to like money moves like that. You're gonna do something like that as opposed to, I don't know, like trying something new. It has to be like worth your time, worth your energy, right? So to the outside, you might look lazy or look like a person that doesn't like to, try new things. That's not the thing. It has to be worth your time. So if money's involved or even something that you want is involved, you're then more likely to take action. Um, and like it doesn't matter what you have to like, overcome to, get that. You're gonna, make it happen. You know, you're also, somewhat patient about things. Um, you take your time to like learn and do whatever you have to if you have to. When it comes to like obtaining those things that you want in life, because you definitely like things. Like things that appeal to your senses specifically. But people like you for that. The people that you attract, they like people who, are more sensible, and they see you as a sensible kind of, person. When you try to, go and grow, you still, have that about you. If I'm not gonna want to do something because it's not worth my time, aka there's no money involved, there's nothing to gain from it, you're not gonna put yourself through that. But people respect you for that. You still have a circle of people who like you because you like that. You know how to put your foot down and be like, no, I'm not doing that kind of thing. There's nothing for me to gain from it. I don't want those things. I value different things. So then people like you and respect you for that. And then, females or guys, depending on who you are, they come to you and you have kids with them. You'll probably have kids too. Now, the next sign is Gemini Jupiter in the fifth house. Gemini Jupiter. You are one who thinks a lot and might even talk themselves out of doing things. You know so much about laws, rules, regulations, what people say, what they've told you, what they, taught you, like through, school, education, books, and it's good to, be like that. Take information in and talk to people. And that's your strength with this placement. It's not a weak placement. Jupiter's, deterred in Gemini, right? Because, when you a true Jupiterian, right? They don't think, they just act. They don't care if they come off stupid, if they come off silly, whatever. But this person will be like, no, I want to come off intelligent, I want to come off this. I'll make sure I have all my facts right, make sure I have everything is clear and concise for people to understand. You they use the word like overly prepared for somebody like you. But it still works to your benefit because, people need people like you who do the, due diligence and make sure they're on their P's and Q's, right? They might ask you things like, do you remember, like, if it's all right if we do something crazy in this area? Like, we don't want to be too loud, would they, fuck with us, if you're trying to throw a party and, it's still kind of close to town or whatever, and, with the, and you would know, like, okay, in this, law or this, regulation says that in a specific, you can recite that and be like, yes, so you would definitely be, charged with this, that, and you are the guy that has the information, or the girl who has the information. You like to talk to people. So you have that part going. So you're still an extrovert, right? When it comes to like getting out of your comfort zone, trying new things to grow, you're willing to talk, basically. That's your strength. Now, how much you have to talk, you probably don't have to talk as much as you think you do. Like overselling yourself kind of thing. But it don't mean undersell yourself and like don't speak at all. That's not what I'm saying. It's just in certain situations you might not want to do that. Because then it's like, I didn't want this extra. Like you're telling somebody who's like at a job and you're talking about something that, has nothing to do with that subject. But it's like you're trying to get the point across that you are intelligent and you know more than just, this or that. But you're going into a job or something and you're applying for like this position or that position, right? And it's specifically for that position. You just need to know, obviously, about that position. You don't got to get, worried about shit. you know, don't second guess yourself. Just talk to people, which you can do. That's why you have a Jupiter placement in Gemini. You have the ability to talk to people, and talking to people, you network with people, and then you can achieve those other goals you want to have. You can grow as a person. You have also the ability to learn because you learn from, talking to people too, right? So it's still a good thing. It's just you might not be seen as a fun type person to other people. Um, you know, but like you find those people that you talk to and like they like talking to you too. See, because it's in the fifth house, they like coming to you to talk to you. So, you still gain fun from that, satisfaction from that, growth from that, and you still have, children probably because it's in the fifth house, man. So they recognize you as a person who wants to grow. They recognize that you're a person who's trying to actually, communicate. When you don't know something, right, you're gonna ask, and you're gonna like know which questions to ask. Not, be an idiot and not know what you're trying to ask somebody or whatever, right? What specific information you're trying to obtain. So that's how you get, ahead, and great luck comes from that. Now, the next sign is Cancer, Jupiter in the fifth house. This person, has an exaltation point. The exaltation point of Jupiter's in Cancer. So, if you have that, you are pretty damn lucky too. You understand that people have deep ties with one another. You seek depth and conversation in your, you know, people you surround yourself with in life. People who don't take life, seriously or see things, in a way that is just, whatever. You like more depth. You like people who can connect to you, understand your emotions. But because of that, you also understand there's people like you out there who are the same way, and they want depth. They want, it ain't necessarily about, you being the smartest person or you being the loudest person or you being a person who, you know, does this or that. What did you have to overcome to be who you are? And that's important to you. Who did you have to, like, cut off and other things? How'd that make you feel? That must have been hard, and but you still overcame that and learned something from it. It's that kind of thing. It ain't like you didn't learn anything from it or this or that. If you're a person with this place, you learn from your life mistakes, which people, tick you off, which people don't, people you have to get away from, people you are, because it's, Jupiter and Cancer, which people you should probably like not give too much advice to because they use it in, negative ways that, will probably hurt somebody or, whatever, you don't necessarily agree with that. When you want to give advice, you want somebody to use the advice you gave in the proper ways, right? when it comes to, finding bitches, finding guys, um, you know, finding the right people to like be friends with. It's cool to have a lot of friends, but you're a person, right? This person who has Jupiter and Cancer, um, you understand the whole, quality over quantity thing when it comes to that, because you care about your family too. You want people who are similar to you in that way, understand the importance of life, and people are people. They're not, you know, animals in the way you should just dismiss them or whatever. And like, even if it's somebody that you like don't fuck with, you have the ability to be like, okay, I don't fuck with them, but I understand this about that person. You can still see the positive aspects in them, and um, even given other situations, I might actually go to this person for this kind of advice, or talk to this person. But like, I would never be their friend. You have that kind of wisdom and knowledge. You're like, okay, this person's like not good for to like be my friend or be around me constantly. But when I need something, and I need to know this kind of information from them, they know all that. So I'm gonna definitely go to them and ask them, even before asking my own friends, because you see the value and the importance in their existence, that kind of thing. Because of that, people are like, damn, you're a caring individual. You see the importance of my existence when other people might say, oh, you're just an idiot, or you're just this, but you're the one that's like, yeah, you are, but there's other things to you that make you, you know, more important than this, that, you had to still go through your struggles and do this and that. Your life still has some importance, right? Again, you able to see, the good and bad in people. So you make, great results from that. Get great results from that. You're also great at persuading people too, because Cancer, right? That's initiating emotion, responses in other people. Yeah, when you give off a feeling of whatever, negative energy, positive emotion, negative emotion, they're gonna feel that, and you learn that through living your life. So like, you try to stay positive, and keep away from people who are toxic, even if you know that, um, you like that. Let's say it's a type of person you like to like fuck around with. You like them for having sex with. That's cool, but then you have to stay away from them. You don't want to overdo that, right? Because you know that in your other relationships that have with people, it um follows you into those relationships, and then those relationships start to deteriorate. So then you're like, you know if I have to cut somebody off, it might hurt, but I have to do that. And then maybe it's vice versa. Maybe you ain't fucking around enough, and then you need to do that. I'm also saying this also because somebody who has displacement is probably likely to have kids. Again, family is important to you. You see growth, and when you see it, right, and you expand, you're expanding for the sake of like your lineage, your family. I want to do right by my family. You know, my mom. That kind of thing. So you ain't gonna let people get to you too much. You can understand if you're in a negative emotion, it was because of your environment, or maybe you came into a situation and you were negative. You'll know, and you would know if you were like which boat you landed. But that's a great place to have. Great money, great connections come from having this place. Anyways, the next sign is Leo, Jupiter in the fifth house. So Leo, Jupiter in the fifth house. You're also somebody who likes to, be seen, right? You like to be seen. You like to be heard. Being seen and being heard, that's a good thing. With this placement, you want that, right? You're confident. People see you as a confident person. You can't be beat. You run like whatever types of fun shit you like. You have a friend group. You have people that support you. are around you, they basically look to you for, to get their spirits lifted, right? When they have other friends who are like not really doing that, they come to you because you are more fun. You know how to like liven the mood. You know, bring them back from a negative feeling, right? You can also offer them a new experience that they have been looking for, right? You know, it don't mean you're like loud necessarily, but when you love something or you like doing something, you're gonna be more loud about it, right? You're gonna be more, extroverted about it. People are gonna know about you. Oh, you're the guy or the girl who talks about this on the internet, or just is known around as a person who does this or does that, and nobody else is like doing it the way you do it, that kind of thing, you know. And it is like that for you people who have this faith, you know. Um, you may come off to be arrogant. You take risks too, because this is a fire placement. So people who have fire in Jupiter will definitely take risks sometimes. Not sometimes, they will. At some point in your life, if you have like fire Jupiter placement, you'll be taking risks in your life. You know, sometimes more frequently than other people. If you have like this placement, then probably. But again, it's fixed fire too. So you have specific things that get you happy and get you like up and moving around, wanting to do things. Um, it ain't the other things that get other people excited. You know, so you basically, I like to always use that as an example. Like, not myself. I don't want to use myself as an example because I don't have this person. But you're a person who likes anime. Let's say, right? You have Jupiter and Leo. You are gonna look for people who do that, people you see as you can learn from, or people you can befriend and basically you know grow with. So I want to grow my YouTube channel talking about anime and shit with this person, and that's the thing. You also um, know that this person also likes anime but might like other things. You don't really care about that, but you ain't like any kind of like fucked up about it necessarily. You just won't be talking about it. You'll be like, okay, man, that's cool, But that I talk about, specifically anime and this and that, and it ain't like you're trying to like necessarily, throw shade at them, but it's like you know how to put people in their place too. You know how to put your foot down and be like, no, guess what? This is what I do, and we are coming together, and you are offering me some new insight on those animes, but I don't think we need to talk about the other stuff, right? Maybe over time this person then goes into like other things, right, and then starts talking about that, but typically they just stick to like one thing. It could be like comic books, and they just like love comic books. They love like X-Men, and they like explore the X-Men, and they know everything about the X-Men, right? And they get excited about that. They talk about it. People love them for it. They know that that's the guy that talks about it, the girl that talks about it. When it comes to other things, they tell people, hey man, I don't talk about that. I'm not knowledgeable on that, but cool for you. But this is what I talk about, and they like let you know, and they it's kind of constant, but it's like not a thing that's like boring because they know how to get other people involved, and they're selling that point, right? With their confidence. Like, you really need to get into this, or really watch this because it's fun. I remember this, and when I first watched it, it made me want to like take on the certain characteristics of this character and bring it into my life and make my life better. That kind of thing. And they can do that shit for people, and people love them for it. So then this person also probably has kids, by the way, and then they're also great with their kids. Yeah, so the next sign is Virgo, Jupiter in the fifth house. Virgo, Jupiter in the fifth house. You are another person who thinks a lot. So you'll tell yourself, that's not, what, I want to do, it's too risky. You know, I'm not going to take a risk like that. However, there's certain times in your life where you do have to take risks. So guess what? You will take a risk. You know, when it comes to like money, you know, when it comes to, you know, getting a promotion at your job, when it comes to, you know, doing things to the best of the ability so you can like gain something from it. You know, money, wealth, some kind of like status. You're gonna make sure you have, you know, all your, you know, the things checked off, everything's checked off. You're gonna make sure you have a plan going into things. You know, if you have to talk to certain people and you don't like, it ain't that you see, because Virgo's not an extroverted sign, right? It likes to analyze and take information in and then deliver information, right? From what they've gathered. You know, because you cannot be talking all the time. But it's like, this is the thing about you. If you have Virgo and Jupiter, you talk about the things that are necessary to talk about. You know, unlike the Gemini who might bring up extra, you know, shit, you know, turn people away. But you could still be lost in details. And like that's why you don't take as many risks as other people, if any at all. You know, you'll have a plan always set up. You always making plans. You're always thinking about something, thinking of a way out of something, thinking of a way to do something that makes you, that doesn't fuck with the way people perceive you as a person. You know, if I act a fool, then they'll always see me as a fool. I have to, you know, get this thing without being foolish, without, you know, sounding like an idiot. You know, you're thinking about all these things. But the thing that helps you out with the Jupiter placement is that you're still willing to talk and really hear what other people say. See, everybody tells you things, right? Because you're an analyzer, right? So you like to look at people and analyze and dissect them. You know, you said this. You know, you're able to like pick up on shit that people say. Maybe if we didn't say something, you know, clearly you ask them again because you like, you're just, your brain's wired to do that. You know, you kind of, and you do remember what people say too. All this helps you out still, but you could get lost in details of things and, you know, allow that to like fuck with you, where you then critiquing other people and you turn a fun situation into a not so fun situation. However, people like you because you have that realistic mindset and they don't hate you for it. They're like, oh, okay, you know, maybe that was, um, too outlandish, and I'm actually the one, you know, who doesn't need to like, you know, to the fuck out. But you, as a person who has Virgo and Jupiter, is telling them this. You know, they appreciate you still, is what I'm saying, for being that like nitpicking kind of person. Because some people never had that in their life, and then you show up and you're just, you know, mature about shit, and you know, letting people know, you know, if you continue down this path, this is probably what's gonna happen, or is likely to happen. You know, now you ain't necessarily, you know, nitpicking them to like, cause like you care about these people. It comes from, you know, a caring kind of energy, not you are telling them not to do something. Just like, I'm not gonna do it. You tell them shit like that. Like, I'm not gonna do that because I know these are the kind of consequences that come from it. You know, and you're telling them out of, you know, care about that person to some degree. You know, maybe you should think a little bit more. You know, it's more like people appreciate you for that. And they ain't gonna like come to you for any kind of like fun, but they'll come to you for like real, you know, advice. And it don't even mean shit like that, Virgo and Jupiter, because guess what? You could be any sign with this placement, right? So when you go out and do things, you know, when you're a person who has like Aries, you're like a Aries or a Cancer or a Scorpio or somebody like that, or you know, somebody who likes to like get down, and have fun. You make sure all areas are covered. You know, you go above and beyond for like, you know, the fun shit too. You can have fun. You know, you could be a fun person to people, but you probably don't have that many friends. Like you have your friends, and that's it. You know, you don't like to gloat so much. You like to have fun for the times you're supposed to have fun. Learn from people, and you like to learn from people too. You like to teach other people, or like give them a reality check. Like maybe you should lean into this more and like focus on these kind of details a little more when doing this or that because you know you're lacking in that area or whatever. People appreciate you for that kind of advice. So then when you have kids, which you probably will have kids, because there's somebody who like sees the way your brain works as fun, right? When you're trying to like go about expanding your life and shit, you take you don't just see it as a fun thing necessarily. You see it as a like important thing. It's like I have to make sure everything's like this or that. There's different paths, all detailed, laid out plan. You're flexible too because it's Virgo, right? So there is like bumps on the path and shit. You still don't you don't want to worry about it, but it's not like you're gonna listen to somebody who you view as stupider than you about your plan or whatever. You still have that earthly quality. All earth signs are similar to some degree. So you're gonna be like, no, I have this specific way I live my life, this specific routine. I don't agree with that. Now I'll consider this, but and add that to my plans, whatever. But I'm not gonna just straight up just do this and like not think about anything at all. But your friends still respect you for it. You know, but you usually have not that big of a friend group, but you don't care because the people that you impact, you understand that they're listening to you when they need to, and you're still having fun with them. You're still learning how to like every once in a while and maybe you don't have to look into the details so much and nitpick, and maybe you're nitpicking as a like joke instead, but also still being serious. you know Now the next sign is Libra, Jupiter in the fifth house. Libra, Jupiter in the fifth house. This person, right? They like to expand and learn things by reading books, talking to people, and other things, right? Like that kind of stuff. They're good with like facts and other things, but also it's Libra, so they somewhat you know they can be convinced by other people to do different things. If you have enough like logic, um, if these people look for people who are intelligent, all right, and can have a conversation, carry a conversation with. Not just that, somebody that they can learn from, maybe even like I can learn something from you still, even if you're this kind of person or that kind of person. I'm gonna try to see it your way a little bit. They try to see both sides of the situation. Now people label that as bad or whatever, but let me try to see that. You're a little bit considerate. You're considering, nature helps you, grow and expand in life, right? It helps you be able to like learn from other people, learn from books. Now, you're also a person too, right? Who views like and has like your status is still everything. Who am I in a friend group? That kind of thing. Um, I cannot be the idiot of the group, kind of shit, right? So you will lie or not lie to yourself. You might lie to yourself, but you will second guess yourself. And when you don't want to do that, but your considerate nature still helps you because you consider, what other people might need, might want, and you do your best to try to, provide that, let's say, like, bitches, bitches like a certain looking guys, you try to, look that way. And not just that. but you also try to like talk that way too, right? And then vice versa for the females. Guys like a certain, body type, certain proportions and other things, right? Because Libra is about, also about, because it's ruled by Venus too. So they take into consideration the like, not just the talking, but also like the looks too. But that is second for you. You also care more about the communication between animals, and that's a strength with this placement. You know, you won't do, but this is the thing, you won't, because you have a sense of justice too. Because Libra, people who have Libra energy anywhere, they have a sense of justice. So people like you for that too. You have a gracious, you know, sense of, that justice. So if anything, like let's say that you're gonna do something, right? But you feel as though or think that, it goes against certain morals you hold, yourself to, you know, I'm not gonna do that then. You know when to put your foot down too. And not just put your foot down, but tell these other people why they're wrong or what you why you feel they might be wrong, and maybe they need to like think, a little bit before they do something that's, messed up. Now you ain't gonna stop them necessarily because, it's kind of passive aggressive with you, right? But you're still gonna let them know, like, hey, I might not want to do that. Or, I'm not gonna do that because of this, and that, and morally, it's morally gray area. I don't know if I want to do that. You know, I'm sorry, but this time I'm gonna have to like, not fucking do it. But sometimes, you actually do it. Certain situations call for, risk taking, and then you learn that too living your life. You know, but through it all, you always have like you try to be clear, calm when talking to people, so you can like gain something. Gain experience, gain knowledge, gain abundance. You try to come off that way to people. People see you when you do that. You're more confident to people when you have this Libra and Jupiter placement. you know, this guy's peaceful. They're level-headed. I can, trust them to listen to me. I can trust them to take on this position, this role in a career. I can trust them to, at least, hear me out when it comes to, other things, right? Um, and offer, interesting conversation. I can learn from you too, because you're a person who likes to, read books, and, look at stats and other things, so people do, see use for you. Um, I wouldn't say you're one that like, because you like to, you might be a little bit like that, or you like, worry too much, so you might withhold information or, not say everything. But if you heart's in it, then you're gonna like let them know a lot, a lot, a lot. You'll like ramble on about shit. People don't mind because the way you deliver it, you're calm, cool, and collected. Now you probably will have kids too with people who you communicate the best with. You know. Now the next sign, that comes with people having planets in the fifth house. So the next sign is Scorpio and Jupiter in the fifth house. So Scorpio and Jupiter, you you like to take risks, basically. Let's not, fucking run that bullshit, right? You like to take risks. You understand, come hell or high water, you're gonna make things happen for yourself. You'll meet any challenge head on and other things. Now it's Scorpio here, so you don't like people knowing how you got to where you were necessarily. You keep a like trusted circle around you. Is basically what I'm saying. When you try to like meet people, you meet people who are kind of like you. You know, we're going. It's all and nothing. We don't let up. We don't give up. When the goal is this, the goal is that. We stay on task. we're about that. If we have to, hurt somebody or, you know, do some other things along the way that are, considered bad or whatever, it don't matter, because we obtained what we needed. We got what we came for. We do not need to, celebrate in a way that is, loud and extravagant, right? Just obtaining our goals, like by any means necessary, is good enough. You're selective of who you like, do business with, who you, sleep with, who you allow in your circle of people, because, loyalty is a thing. And, again, introverts know about that shit a little more, it seems like. Quality over quantity, you know. But that's the thing. It's kind of, like that because you like to, fuck around and have fun too. So, you know, obviously you're gonna have kids too. Scorpio is a sexual, place. Or if you have any planets in Scorpio, it's, sexualize that area, to some degree, or we'll say intensify. We'll use that. So you do like to, expand, learn new things. But if you aren't attaining, the goals want, right? You want to have this amount of, bitches fucked around with. You want to have this amount of money. These kind of, things. You know, anything you desire, you're gonna make that shit happen. No matter who you have to talk to, you'll talk to them. You'll talk to them in a way that, like, even if you have to, like, talk to somebody you hate, you'll do it still. You know, all in order to attain your, ultimate goals, whatever it is. It ain't evil. I'm saying this. If you had to, you probably would. Out of all the signs, you would, probably kill somebody to attain your goals. You know, it's that serious to you. Now, I'm not saying all you people who have Scorpio and Jupiter are gonna kill somebody to attain your goals. To grow in other things. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that you live in an intense way. You know, some might say that's too much for them. It's very ambitious. Goals you kind of have. You know, and again, you also don't care about the clout shit too much. You don't mind being in the background, having your things and being having fun that way. That's fun to you. You know, people can respect your privacy and shit like that. You know, so basically, what you probably would learn is select the females right, select the guys right. You don't want to fuck around with somebody who's like an extrovert and will just run their fucking mouth about your business, you know, all up and down the fucking street. You don't want that, right? So you'll just, select wisely. And you know this shit going into it. Even if you're like, let's say you have like a wind or earth placement and you're not really like known to be, very intuitive or, really like into like reading body language or a very, fun, creative type, you still are because you have this placement. When you try to like, go out and have fun, you try to do it in an intense way, in a way that, gets your point across. People know what you're trying to like accomplish and other things. They know that you're about what you're trying to accomplish, whatever that might be, better job, better, house, a better, car, a better woman, you know, anything, they sense the intensity, you know. You just have to do everything with an intensity in your life. That's experiencing life to the fullest for somebody like you. And people like you for that, might not be too much for some of your friends, and they like that because it challenges them and it challenges you, and they see that, you've become a better person from it. They become a better person from it. Again, though, you're a person who probably has quality friends, right, over quantity friends. And that's not a bad thing. Now, you probably have kids too. Now, the next sign is, Sagittarius and Jupiter in the fifth house. Now, this is the placement, the home placement of Jupiter. So this person already knows about, you know, not wasting time, not, overthinking, not, doubting themselves. They're very confident people. They're very charismatic people, right? People who have this placement. And that's why people like them. That's why they have so many friends and other things. They have friends that do this, friends that do that. And it's like they don't have a closed mindset, right? Um, I would probably say that they're the most flexible of the, zodiac. You know, people who have Sagittarius energy. You know, now I'm not saying that they don't have things that tick them off. They definitely do. And if you know, let's say you're trying to grow and you're trying to do something new, and you have Sagittarius and Jupiter. You know, anything trying to like hold you back, you're not gonna take kindly to that. You'll still make shit happen. You like to meet challenges head on too, right? You'll tell them like it is. You'll be like, I'm doing this. I like that. I don't give a fuck about your feelings towards it. That I need to do this. If I don't, then I'm not living my life. I'm not growing. I'm not learning. I'm not, you know, going after what I want. I'm not living in abundance. I can't live in a way that's like, where constrain myself. You know, I'll learn from, these people about this, because it interests me. I'll do that. I'll have fun doing it. Then I'll, do this. And I'll have fun doing that. You see the positive in things, right? Now people will be like, oh, well, looking at you, some may say, oh, well, that's not a life worth living. It ain't even that. It's not that it's not a life worth living. It's a life worth living, but they wouldn't do that because they have to think a lot before doing things. You don't like to think before doing things. You know, if it excites you, you want to do it, you'll learn throughout the journey, throughout the, life experience, whatever we're going through, whatever you're going through, right? You'll have people that come, people that go. You'll stay positive through that. You'll let them know still though. Like that's the thing. You'll still like, put your foot down or be like, loud, upset. Oh, why are you doing this? Da, 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 da. You don't hold anything back. That's a good thing about that placement. You have that kind of confidence. You might swear, you may, hurt people's feelings, but people respect you for the bluntness that you display, in a situation. You're told to do something that you don't want to do. You're gonna tell somebody, oh well, I don't like doing that. But if it's, what it needs to be, then it's what it needs to be. You know, other people would, not say what, you know, is going on with them and other things. And, sometimes it, hurts, but, you believe in, letting them know straight up, you know, as opposed to not, and maybe some people forget, or maybe, see, you're creative too, like very creative person, with a mindset of you like yours, right? You don't allow your imagination to be, fucked with. So whatever you imagine, whatever you, visualize, want to create, you make that shit happen. You have that kind of confidence. Other people actually like you because you know, somewhat carefree. You know, you learn from, living. These people, whatever person you are, these type of people could tick me off. These type of people don't tick me off as much. And these people are the greatest people to like, be friends with and, have fun with, you know, fuck around with maybe, guys to, females, I like these type of girls, not these type of girls, and you like not gonna let like somebody else's opinion of that also like slow you down. Like you might say like somebody might say something like, Oh, this girl was, Asian and she looked beautiful. Now, you're gonna listen to that and be like, oh, Asian girl's beautiful. You're gonna then go look for that, but you're not gonna be like, let's say somebody's like, you shouldn't, fuck with that girl. Da 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 da. You're still gonna go see what's up with that. You know, because that was them and you, somebody else. Um, that being said, jobs, career, money come to you, easier with displacement. But also kids come to you easier with displacement too, since Jupiter and Sagittarius lies in the fifth house here. You'll probably have children too, you know. So you might be fun to them, but you also might not be, parents sometimes because you're too busy trying to have fun. But you can still make it work though. You can still make, it work because you are a loud, person. You actually have the ability to communicate, So that's a good thing because other parents can't communicate with their kids well, but you actually can. So the next person is Capricorn, Jupiter in the fifth house. Now this person is, good too, right? So they'll think a little bit, but it's thinking towards obtaining things that they want. They're career oriented, job oriented people. They like to work hard towards the things they want. This could be sex, this could be money, this could be, status, right? They'll, work hard, they'll work their ass off to, get what they want when it comes to these things, right? But they still use a little bit of sense when it comes to that, right? They ain't like not thinking. They still, methodical and other things. So, like, let's say they have a job, or they're in a certain career field. They're gonna make sure they know their job, and they're gonna make sure they know other people's job too. Now, people take note of that because in this placement, it's Jupiter and Capricorn in the fifth house, so people take note of that. Now, whereas you had this placement in another house, it wouldn't be, people wouldn't be seeing that shit as much. But now it's in the fifth house, and they see that, and they're like, and it's not in as the person who has this placement, it's in you to like you have fun because like you're learning something new, you're learning all the ins and outs of whatever career field you're in. You're learning from other people, teaching it to other people, and you actually genuinely enjoy doing shit like that. So and that's like the learning and the growth in that way, right? And then you obtain things from it, right? Because of course, if you learn somebody else's job, you do it better than them. You the higher ups take note that, oh shit, this guy actually knows. He knows. He knows my job better than me. He's probably gonna take my position. If somebody higher than him says nope, you're there, and next thing you know, you're actually running your own business because you took the time to study all kind of things, right? Learn from people, you know outwork other people. You have a hustler's mindset. Now when it comes to bitches and stuff, you don't care about you only care about what you and them have to do. Or if you're a female too with this place, you don't care about the hoopla so much. You just need to get your fun in, right? I need to fuck around with somebody, so you make that happen. So Capricorn energy is very aggressive, assertive too, but it's like I don't care about other people's opinions either. It's just a physical need that I have, that kind of thing. So you do hunt that shit and you do get that shit. And it's like, you understand that people see your results too when you get them. And, when you have all these things and other things, you don't have to say too much. You might have to say some things, but, everything around you speaks. Things you have and status, money you've gained from all the hard work and the people you're fucking with. And let's say you're in the process of doing this shit, people still see it though. They see you're moving around. You're not just doing your job, you're doing other people's job too. And that's where the growth and learning comes from. So you're in a career that from the outside, somebody might say that shit's boring, but everything about it. You get enjoyment, you get, gain importance from that. So, you go in, you do that, you learn from whoever you have to learn from. You may even name drop people who like helped you out. These are the people who I learned from the best. I recommend them. If I like it, you will know, like, okay, if I you ain't getting it because I ain't teaching it right, or you don't understand what I'm saying, then go talk to these guys because they taught me this and that. You know how to like get people on the right track. Again, Capricorn's the placement of, or the element of, cardinal earth, so that's like initiating action, yourself and other people. So, and you probably have kids too, with this placement. And like, again, they appreciate you because you're just a hard worker, a guy who has his shit together, and an example of what other guys should try to be like, or females even. Females that if she has to cut somebody off, she has to cut somebody off. You ain't just gonna spread your legs, or think a little bit about who you want to get things from. If you just want to fuck around, or whatever, right? You know, they see you as a more mature, more, you hold yourself to standards and people like that. Now the next sign is Aquarius Jupiter in the fifth house. Aquarius Jupiter in the fifth house. You might, tell yourself shit sometimes. You know a lot, but you sound smart, right? Um, when you try to explain things to people, or take information in, because you like to take information in, you like to learn from people. But if you talk too much, or you second guess yourself, that's where the blessings and other things might not come, or whatever. But that's the thing. You are a person who knows. I like these kind of things. I like people who talk about these kind of subjects. I like to have these kind of conversations. I like to pose these kind of questions, to people. I'll find people who do that kind of thing, or speak about these kind of things, and have these kind of conversations. And then, networking is the thing that Aquarius do best, right? You have a group of friends that, do this and that, and, you guys come together for, common goals, and, your money comes from that, then you're friends, so you have that going for you. If you need a place to stay, whatever, you have those, friends there, you came up together, plan things out, work together, equally shared ideas, or whatever. Um, accomplish your goals. You're good at communicating, so that's the blessing there with this sign, right? And you offer, um, a type of, ideas that other people might not have thought about. They might have glanced over, but you've seen it. So you offer, questions, getting people in your, friend group to think a little more, and consider other things, that other people weren't bringing up. People like Gemini and, Libra might not have been bringing this up. Kind of outside the box thinking a little bit. But it could also work against you again if you're, you know, too much about, being the one that is, like that, and this and that, you know, not alienating yourself, but it kind of comes across like you trying to be the smartest or whatever. Nobody can tell you because you know everything. You've done the research, you've done this, you've done that. Talk to these people who've done that, but you actually might not have done any of that. But then there's also this too. You're unpredictable as well. So people think that you do this, or do that, or think in these ways, but because it's this is a sign, of course, it's a sign ruled by that. Um, you could be working, in a place, or of being around a group of friends that people never thought you would be around. I never, like, you're the kind of people that, like, people look at your life and then be like, oh, I never would have thought that this person would be with this group of people. I never thought that they would be hanging out with them, or this or that. But you're gaining things from that. You're learning from this experience. You're, also, somebody who doesn't like you don't like to be boxed in, right? You like to think outside the box. You know, essentially it's like this: if anybody's gonna box you in, it's gonna be yourself. Nobody else, right? You talk to people, you let people know what you think, what you want to be about, are about. So then, people respect that and they know that, right? So communication is a good thing to have when it comes to like trying to grow and trying to, expand, right? Because if you can't talk or don't feel like talking, how can you ever get anything done? So you have that as a lesson too. And I already said that, I know, but you probably might have kids with people you like really jive with and shit. And, you also like other things like physical things about them. But again, if you're looking for that, you're also looking for the communication, the learning aspect. This person offers me this kind of knowledge that I'm trying to learn. That kind of thing. And it just so happens that we, like each other that way too. The last sign is, Pisces, Jupiter in the fifth house. Pisces, Jupiter in the fifth house. You are definitely somebody who attracts, abundance, right? You are abundant, so you attract that kind of thing, right? You like to, try different things. That's a mutable sign, right? Mutable placement, that is. So it adds to your, adaptability as a person. So you could be any person with this placement. Goes to show you basically you care about, human beings, right? Because this is a water placement. You understand that people aren't just, made to be, stepped on. There's, some depth there. You came from something, you've done something. See, you are a person who's creative. Pisces and Cancer, right? Or Pisces, Cancers, Scorpios who have, displacement, but Pisces especially is one that's creative, right? You know, creative in that they like the arts, they like the, music. They don't think too much. People like with Pisces, they ain't thinkers, but they're intuitive, right? You know what somebody else would feel like if you did a certain action. If I took this kind of action, right, I can provide or make them feel, this kind of, emotion. And that moves people in, beautiful ways and, inspires them, you know. With this placement, you're not always allowed, but people get the point too because you take the time to, know somebody, get to know them, you care for them. So you're like, how's your day going? Is there anything I can do for you? I feel as though where you look like, you're going through it. See, I like to say these people who have Pisces energy try to come into people's lives, at the right time in the right place. They try to be like saviors. They try to, you know, warm up to people, and they know how to do it. See, you're a very persuasive person too. That helps you out. Persuasive, intuitive. You know, just by glancing at somebody if they're, going through it, if they're happy, if you're needed there, and even if you're not needed there, you still have a way to make yourself needed there. You know how to turn a, bad situation into a good situation. By, evoking emotions in other people, getting them to feel deeply about something, and that's your greatest strength with displacement. Jupiter and Pisces. You know, move people emotionally through your, creative arts acts. Maybe you're making videos, maybe you're, making paintings, maybe you're a musician, you know, being creative, doing these creative kinds of works, right? Talking in a way that is, you know, not too loud, like not about me necessarily, but makes the other person feel like they're important. See, you people know how to do this the best, whether you realize it or not. Because like this, right? Like, I wouldn't want that coming back on me. Or I wouldn't want to be treated that way. So I'm not going to treat somebody that way. Now, sometimes you might treat somebody in a negative way, though, to get a point across. Because you were treated that way. You learned something from it, so you want them to learn too. So then you might, use a negative emotion to get a point across. But it was to get a point across. It was for them to learn something. You might not be the smartest person with this placement, but you're a fun person to be around, and great things can come from it. Wealth, money, deep connections to other people is basically what I'm trying to say with you, if you have this placement. Um, and like deep connection means, you have a tight bond with these people that you create connections with, no matter what happens, you try to, make that relationship last throughout a lifetime. Now, that being said, that's all the, zodiac, all the 12 zodiac and Jupiter as it, pertains to the fifth house. So if you have any of those placements in the fifth house, you want to know if you have any of those placements in the fifth house, you can get a natal reading from me for $350. That comes with the numerology reading as well, you know. So that's all I need is your name, your full name, your date of birth, your place of birth, and then your time of birth, and that's all I need. And then $350, and then you'll have, your natal reading, all your placements, which houses they lie in, which aspects of their, which areas you struggle in, which areas you don't struggle in. And like, you know, um, and yeah, man, that's, get in contact with my emails, they're there on the, on YouTube. And I'll have other videos coming out soon too. Next week will be Saturn in the fifth house. And then I'll be on to the sixth house, and I'll be talking about that on Wednesdays. But be cool, call on the corner, and let me know what your placement is in the comments. And if you don't know, get a natal reading from me. It helps out a lot. It helps me out a lot, especially right now. But be cool, call on the corner. I got other videos coming out too.